giving you that big game breakdown, taking you inside the matchup of some of the biggest games of the week in the Big Ten. And Penn State just continues to climb up the rankings as it has maintained that 0 in the loss column all the way through mid to late October. But now here comes a tricky part of the schedule, because this week you're going to be at Wisconsin, and you've got to focus there and not be distracted by the fact that you get to host Ohio State the following week. So, Tom, Wisconsin has been playing better. Wisconsin has also been playing against some of the teams that are really struggling in the Big Ten, bottom of the Big Ten standing, some of the worst performing teams in the Big Ten. So is it the who you played or the how you played? What should we make of Wisconsin's recent run of success?
You know, I'm always going to be a who or how you play over a who you're playing as far as what matters the most. But it is, you do have to point out the three teams that Wisconsin has been playing against the last few weeks are not exactly the top of the league. They are not the cream of the crop. And this is far and away the best test that they will have faced since the Alabama game. But the good news is, at least you're feeling good about yourself going into the game compared to how things might have been when you look at how this season began. They had some tough games in the non-conference that they escaped, and then Alabama comes to town. You lose your starting quarterback for the season. This year could have gone very poorly for the Badgers after that happened, but the last 3 weeks with Braden Locke, the fact of the matter is this offense is starting to look competent again. If you just look at the nation in the last 3 games, Wisconsin ranks 33rd nationally in points per drive, 29th in success rate, and 30th in explosive play rate, which isn't elite by any stretch, but it is miles better than where they were. In fact, before that 3-game stretch, they were dead last in the country in explosive play rate. So for them to be 30th in this recent span shows how things have changed. And going into this game, you have to wonder if Wisconsin will be able to continue hitting big plays through the passing game, which is what they've been doing in recent weeks. Because when you look at this Penn State defense, it's phenomenal. We've talked about it on this show every week for over a month now, how good this defense is, particularly on the defensive line. But while they're great against the run, they have shown some susceptibility to giving up big plays in the passing game. So there is the chance for Wisconsin to do that. The question mark for me is, will Wisconsin be able to run the ball effectively enough to do so? Because a lot of what they have done with those big explosive plays in the passing game has been built off of their run game finding success in recent weeks. And last week against Northwestern, Wisconsin won 23-3, which is great. But if you actually watch the game, they weren't able to run the ball very effectively, and that kind of hurt their ability to throw the ball very effectively. So that Northwestern defense, it's good. It's nothing like this Penn State defense, though. So there are some legit questions of whether or not the Badgers are going to be able to have that same kind of success in this one. I think they can. I think Braden Locke is genuinely looking more comfortable and more confident in this offense. And I think offensive coordinator Phil Longo is kind of figuring out ways to suit the offense to what he's good at. But it's going to be a very tough test.
Tough test indeed, Tom. I'm curious to see how Wisconsin functions if they're not able to just pound the rock with Walker as they've been doing in recent weeks. Like I definitely like how they've regrouped after the loss of their starting quarterback. They're still playing hard. They still seem to be pretty bought in to what Fickell is preaching right now. Like the defense obviously loses their best player on the defensive interior, Thompson, for the year, and yet they haven't missed like that much of a beat. But if they're not able to own the lines of scrimmage, like the last 2 weeks, Rutgers was really, really beat up. And all due credit to Wisconsin for going in there and beating a beat-up team and beating them down bad. But like still, who's not on the field for Rutgers matters a whole lot, because it's not like Rutgers has good players on the bench, right? Like if their studs are out, they're in real trouble because it's Rutgers. So Penn State has different types of bodies, I think, than Wisconsin has faced for the most part this year. The last time we saw Wisconsin face a team that has those type of players on the defensive line, it was Alabama. And it did not end very well for the Badgers. But they fought hard. Like they moved the ball at times in that game. I think they could probably find a way to hang in this thing a little bit. The question is going to be, like, can Penn State hit the explosives? Because if they can't, it's hard to pull away from people. Like, you're not going to just pull away driving slowly. We'll see what Penn State can do here.
The other game, I felt like I had to talk myself into Illinois having a chance against Oregon. This game, I actually do think Wisconsin has a chance. We'll see if we go ahead and pick the outright upset on our Locks pod tomorrow. But I think they're playing so much better. The Alabama game was the game they lost Tyler Van Dyke. You know, that's really hard to overcome the loss of your quarterback. Ches Malusi, then a couple games, maybe a game later, he walks away from the program. They've had adversity all over the place. And I do think they're on to something. They're playing a lot better. They're playing with more confidence. And clearly, this will be probably the biggest challenge they've had since it was Alabama that was there in town. But Penn State is also a team that I look at, and yes, it's been impressive, but they did almost lose to USC, who lost to Maryland, right? I mean, and they've been a little bit too one-dimensional with Tyler Warren. Like, as explosive as this pass offense has been, and they brought this more explosive firepower, it still is reliant on one player. Like, that's concerning. And I think Wisconsin actually, if you can try to take Tyler Warren away with your linebackers and safeties, is there a receiver yet that really strikes a ton of fear in you from Penn State? I still think they're trying to figure it out. So I think Wisconsin has a chance in this game. And I think it's very interesting because the way we described Wisconsin coming into the season was they might be a better team, but their record's probably going to be the same as last year, which wasn't good by Wisconsin standards. I think they're better than they were last year, and I think it's a big chance to prove it for them after having a couple tough losses. And don't forget, they were up on USC, blew that lead. I know USC came right back, but that was with Miller Moss kind of passing the ball down the field and coming back in that game. I don't know if Penn State, if I'm completely sold on them being able to do this on the road, we shall see. But I think this is a really good matchup.
All right, Tom, if Penn State goes and they do blow Wisconsin out, like, who's the guy for the Nittany Lions who, if you're writing a post-game report, has just totally gone off?
I think that in order for that to happen, if you look at how things have worked for the Nittany Lions in recent weeks, it's going to have to be a reemergence of Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Because, you know, if you go back to last week's or the last time we saw Penn State playing against USC, we talked a lot about how great Drew Aller looked and how it was nice to see him taking more chances down the field, even if it resulted in a couple of turnovers. Tyler Warren had the huge game. But the one thing we haven't really touched on when it comes to the way Penn State's playing is, where has the run game gone? Because if you look at their non-conference portion of the schedule this season, they had an explosive play rate of 16.3% on the ground. In 3 Big Ten games, it's down to 6.7%. Those big runs that they were able to hit against West Virginia and Bowling Green and Kent State are not there. We mentioned earlier when we were talking about Illinois, they were able to make successful runs against the Illini, but they weren't able to break big ones. Same thing happened against UCLA, and we saw the same thing last time out against USC. So if the Nittany Lions are going to go on the road, take care of business, and absolutely blow the doors off of this Wisconsin team, odds are you're going to see Nick Singleton and Katron Allen running through some secondaries for some big plays and long touchdown runs. And I think that that's what they need to get back to, because I think Drew Aller is a very good player. I just don't think this Penn State team can get to where it wants to go and achieve what it wants to achieve unless they get that run game going again. They have to be a well-balanced, explosive offense.
To your point, though, Tom, it's not for lack of trying. Their run rate is still 60%. They just haven't been getting it. It's kind of the same thing that we talked about last year. Like, it was an offense that had to drive the length of the field. They were missing that explosive firepower, those explosive big plays. And we focused so much on the pass game. Where is that in the pass game? But they were also frustrated within the run game last year, too. And that's the part that I think that's been missing. Like, we get a little bit caught up in what Tyler Warren did and going over 200 yards, and here's some big plays. But to your point, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, they haven't been those kind of big dynamic backs, at least in a few games, that we maybe thought they could be. So that one's big for me. Like, that's where I think Wisconsin, if you can take away Tyler Warren, if you can stop the run game, which is easier said than done, and put this game on Drew Aller's back once again. And I was somebody who was raving about him after USC, right? I like this new one, and he made that big 4th and 10 conversion, and he looked like he was a playmaker for the first time. You have to continue and stack on that performance really to continue this evolution as a quarterback. Can he? We'll see. But I think this is a good, challenging matchup for Penn State. And I think Luke Fickell's a great defensive mind who's going to have this team ready to go. He's going to have them in a frenzy. You know it's going to be a hostile environment. And again, stacking up those 3 wins where the defense has played really well. I know it's not the same competition, but only giving up 209 total yards of offense, 271 total yards of offense, 216 total yards of offense, 3.7.6 points. That's pretty big good numbers no matter who you're playing against. They've been pretty dominant on the defense side of the ball.
All right, I kind of lean Penn State in a convincing, but maybe not blowout fashion. Danny, then Tom, what's your quick leans?
In case you haven't noticed, I am leaning towards Wisconsin potentially pulling off the upset. You know, I have been big on the home dogs this season, but we got one with Tennessee last week. That was a different matchup, different point spread. But I am leaning towards Wisconsin being a live dog here.
Yeah, I think Penn State's gonna win. I do think that it is gonna be a closer and maybe more difficult game than they're expecting or hoping for, because we saw last time Penn State went on the road, they faced USC and it was a close game. They struggled. Now they're going on the road to an environment that I think is far more difficult to play in than the Coliseum was against USC at Camp Randall, with a team that's won 3 straight. And as we mentioned earlier, they've got a pretty big game looming next week. So it wouldn't be too surprising to see if maybe they get caught looking ahead a little bit. So I think they win, but I think it's going to be a challenge.